Hello everyone, my name is Ritika Patni. I am the founder of the Art of Health in Singapore and also a member of the core group steering Ayurveda Day celebrations globally, which is anchored by India Foundation's Center for Public Diplomacy and Soft Power. In this series of World Ayurveda podcasts, we bring to you interactions with global ambassadors, students, researchers, and enthusiasts from the world of Ayurveda. I'm delighted today to welcome Ms. Lalita Kumar Mangalam, who is a well-known Indian politician and also the former chairperson of the National Commission for Women. As a graduate of one of India's leading colleges, St. Stephen's College, Delhi, where she acquired a degree in economics, and after that, an MBA from Madras University. Today, Ms. Kumar Mangalam runs her NGO by the name of Prakriti, and also is the director of India Foundation, which has been anchoring the global Ayurveda Day celebration. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Ritika ji. I'm very happy to be on board here today for this podcast with you. And right in the beginning, let me thank you for all the efforts that you've always put into work with India Foundation on seeing that Ayurveda is mainstreamed in not only India, but throughout the world.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for your support. It's a pleasure to have you here today, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing stories from your life and how Ayurveda has played a role in your life through all these years. So, going to the beginning, when if we look at your childhood, you were growing up as a kid in India. What would you say are some of your earliest memories of Ayurveda?
My mother was a Bengali. So she had what we used to call green fingers. And when I was a child, I was born into this huge place, about half an acre of land in somewhere, what is today Central Madras. So we had a lot of trees in our garden. And my mother would always have a neem tree. She always had a tulsi tree. I don't know how she produced mint leaves in Chennai, but she did. And she always had different forms of lemons. So as a child, I say, why so many trees? I love flowers. I love color, like all children. And of course, the ubiquitous hibiscus tree. So she used to say that, this is what is used in the hair oil I put on your hair. You have oily skin. I rub the lime on your face. Now, in India, these are part of life. You don't realize that it's a science that we're actually using, which makes, your life better. And I never thought of it as Ayurveda. I never even thought of it as a science in those days, to be quite frank. But then today, when I look back, I see how much in tune with nature Indian everyday daily life is, and how much naturally we have all this knowledge.
Yeah, that is so true. I think Ayurveda is such an integral part of people's lives in India that I think even without realizing actively that you're using Ayurveda, I think everybody in India is using Ayurveda. But Lalita ma'am, what would you say was your first proactive brush with Ayurveda, where you consciously used Ayurveda?
Okay, where I consciously used Ayurveda myself was Indian women are very proud of their hair. We are supposed to have beautiful hair on an average, right? And as I said, we have this Joba Kushum. That is the red hibiscus plant always in our house. My mother actually had something like 21 different colors, but she had 3 different red colors. And we used to always ask her, what is it? It's an old family story. My father used to use Joba Kushum tail on his hair, and we used to make a lot of fun of him because he was a man who would grade very early. So my mother used to say that he said, your mother introduced me to this, and this is very good for my hair. Every time we sort of teased him. And she was very clear that, she would make a mixture of, as I said, she was Bengali. So a mixture of castor oil and coconut oil and a little mustard oil thrown in, and boil it with all these sort of jadi botis. I think it included tulsi and amla. She was very fond of amla. She said amla is very good for diabetes, for constipation. God only knows what all things. I've forgotten everything that she said to me. And of course, Mardani, that is henna. I'm sorry, I'm getting confused with the word, the languages I'm using. And that was one of my first memories of, in Tamil Nadu, throughout India, you have this thing of saying jhappi, tel ki jhappi. That is, you rub oil in your hair and really massage your head well. When I was a child, of course, all I knew was that I loved it because it really made you feel much cooler and much better. And we used to, in the South, we used to use shikakai to wash the oil out of the hair, not soap. My earliest memories of using it consciously was about the age of 13, 14, by which time we had moved to Delhi. And this is a very dry climate as compared to Chennai, where I was born. So my mother had changed the ingredients in the oil and added, more mustard oil, less all sorts of things. And I once remember asking her, and she said, well, one needs to change these things according to the weather and the place you live. And then I asked her, I said, what is this? I mean, is this, from where did you learn all this? She said, look, Indian women are repositories of knowledge. We know all these almost instinctively. This is what our grandmothers, mothers, and before them they did. This knowledge has been passed down. You just use it. It's very good for your hair. So I continued to, even then I wouldn't say I did it consciously as Ayurveda. I didn't know the name, the term, but I did know that it was something that helped me vastly, in getting rid of a lot of the common problems, dandruff, hair fall, and all this sort. At that age when you're growing up, girls are very conscious about these sort of things. I did know that once a week or twice a week when I did that, my hair always remained pretty good. I really had no problem. So that is the first conscious memory I have of it.
That is such a beautiful story. I think after this conversation, we will probably have some women writing to us asking us for this secret formula that you have inherited from your mother. But Lalitaji, of course, moving on with life, today different kinds of diseases, lifestyle diseases, are afflicting people. Yes. All over the world, and you yourself, have had a personal battle with cancer.
Yes, breast cancer.
Yes. And you initially underwent conventional treatment, chemotherapy for it.
Yes.
But you often say, and I've heard, in some of my conversations with you, where you've said that you found respite in Ayurveda for your recovery. So can you share a little bit more about this experience?
Yeah, sure. I went through surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation. Now, my doctor once told me during chemotherapy that when you have chemotherapy, all the weakest points of your body are going to be exacerbated. For example, my stomach. I keep telling this to people that throughout chemotherapy, I was either having diarrhea or severe constipation. So, and all sorts of medicines. It was terrible because chemotherapy really drains you. And you can't sleep properly, you can't eat properly, you feel very nauseous all the time, you lose taste. So there was nothing I could really eat. Then finally, a friend of mine from Chennai actually told me, there's something called Narthangai, which is a very sour type of, it's a type of lemon, which we dry and dip it in salt and I think more, which is curd lassi. I mean, not sweet lassi, but then we dry it in the sun and we use it with curd rice. So I asked my doctor and he smiled and said, yes, that's one of the best remedies for when you lose taste and when you can't eat, and it'll also be very good for your stomach. So I literally lived for about 4 months off and on Thai sadham. Sometimes I would say I want something else to eat, but that was very rare. So that was one thing. The second was radiation had a very bad effect on my skin. So ultimately, despite me going to the dermatologist and all of it, she said, ma'am, do you have aloe vera and tulsi at home? I said, no, I have aloe vera, tulsi I don't, but I can always get it. So she said, if you could, if you can get the juice out of the aloe vera and grind a little tulsi with it and try and apply it. Now, breast radiation is always in a very awkward place. And radiation, when the skin peels, it's a second degree burn. So the first couple of weeks you bleed, you can't really put anything there on it. But she said, try putting this and, lying flat on your back and seeing if it could help. What it did was that it did reduce the burning feeling. It's hell to go through it, but it did really help. And then eventually, of course, it was some sort of mixture of both conventional and allopathic creams, etc., that helped me to get over it finally. But I have to say that this really took me through or saw me through some of the worst of that. And again, these are common remedies that are available in India and I think in many other parts of the world, but we take them for granted. We don't see them as part of science. The advent of allopathic medicine, and I think the power of the allopathic lobby has made us doubt our own traditional healing methods, our own traditional medicine that we depend on so much.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really true. I think, like I said, we take it for granted, but actually there is just so much to gain out of our traditional herbs and use
Yes.
of traditional knowledge systems. So uh, you know with all your experiences, some from childhood for more day-to-day things, and then growing up for more serious conditions, how do you ensure that your children continue to use the rich heritage of Ayurvedic knowledge in their lives?
Well, in everyday life, there are two things I'm very strict about. That we have a lot of curd every day, and yogurt. As you know, yogurt is the best probiotic you can find in the world. And it's now marketed as Yakult in India, as many other things in Singapore and in different parts of the world. Now, that's one thing that I insist on because it's always very good. I insist on a lot of use of ghee because a very long time ago, a very good friend of mine who actually now holds a fairly high constitutional position in India, I'm not going to give the name out, once told me that when you eat a lot of chili, you should eat ghee with it and curd with it. Ghee, I asked him why. He said, well, it's a common, I don't know why, but my mother, my grandmother, my aunts, all of us always told me that we eat a lot of chili, so you should eat ghee with it, whether it's chapati or rice or whatever it is. It helps in coating the stomach, the lining of the stomach, and you don't get as much acidity as you normally would. So these are two things that I swear by. Even through the years when we were told that ghee is bad for cholesterol and all of that, and today, of course, that's been disproved. But these are two things I really believed in. This is, of course, aside from the usual kasayam that we use all over the country. Kasayam is a Tamilian word. Ginger, lemon, pepper in hot milk, as when you start coughing, like I'm doing now, when you have allergies. And the use of inhalation with, it's again called Nilgiri Tile. That is, I guess, the traditional form of wintergreen oil, possibly it's called in the West, and eucalyptus oil, the mixture that is, made all over India. Yeah. So these are things that we use as a matter of course, apart from the hair oil. And the other thing I insist on is a lot of use of turmeric. Turmeric is extremely good for health, and I use a lot of that. Tamil Nadu is one of the largest producers of turmeric in the country. So along with chili and tamarind, we use a lot of turmeric, and that's something that I automatically teach all my cooks and my maids, etc., to use.
It's so interesting, all the things that you've said. So many of these have today become modern day superfoods and fads. And
exactly.
now when I walk into the Starbucks, you get turmeric latte or turmeric milk, right, which we've been having all along. And what you said about the ghee is also really interesting, because now ghee is becoming a fad. People are having these bulletproof coffees with mixed in it. But one of the stories I remember from my childhood is that my great grandmother lived up well beyond the age of 100, and she only ever ate anything if it was cooked in ghee. And growing up, I never understood it, but having studied Ayurveda, you understand the real health benefits of ghee. So it's great to know that you are continuing that tradition in your house. And I hope more people are inspired after listening to you. Lalita ji, one of the things, as a user of Ayurveda, like with every other system, Ayurveda has some deficiencies as well. So what, according to you, are the gaps in the practice of Ayurveda in India?
I think one of the biggest gaps is how we place it, how we look at it. Like I said, we are not taught from childhood that this is a scientific thing we are doing. We are just taught that this is part of our culture. And so the fact that it's actually a science that has been absorbed by the Indian culture is something that fails us. So we are not good at promoting it as a science. It's more about, it is a part of our culture, but culture has so much of science in it. And we forget that. Whether it's as individuals or as a community or as a society or even as a culture, we forget that so much of our culture is based actually on science. Whether it's the discovery of zero, etc. Ayurveda is also a science. All of this is part of it that has been integrated and, you know, taken over by what we call custom. But customary does not mean unscientific in India. And this is something I think we have actively, you know, lagged in promoting. So we now need to promote it as a science, whether it is in terms of the superfoods that you're talking about, like curcumin, which is a byproduct of turmeric, right? Whether it is any of these things, or probiotics that are a byproduct of curds, yogurt. We need to understand that this was there in India for hundreds of thousands of years, and this is part of our scientific culture, which has been absorbed by what is generally called culture. We need to invest actually in active publicity, active what we call IEC, information, education, communication. People must learn that this is already there for you. Use it, and don't use it just because it's something that's been passed on. Understand why you're using it. That itself will make people understand that Ayurveda is not just you know, a form of what we practice every day in our life. It's actually a science that has helped in myriad ways Indians without even us knowing it. And health today is seen as not just of health. You know, allopathy is, I feel this, maybe I'm wrong, I don't think I'm very wrong, but allopathy is more about cure. Ayurveda is more about prevention and cure. That is something that really, what we call wellness, I think, in the English terminology for that. But in India, it's just called swasthya in various, you know, languages over the country. In Tamil, it's probably called, it has another word. But you'll find that in India, the concept of health is not just about falling sick and getting better. It's about actually ensuring that you stay happy and healthy, both mentally and physically. And this is very important. It's a very important part of Ayurveda, I know, but it is also a very scientifically important concept that has been around for many, many years, centuries in our country. We need to teach children, we need to start young. Yeah. And teach them that this, you know, the wealth of Ayurveda is actually the wealth of a medicinal, of a scientific, you know, knowledge that we should accept and promote.
No, that's very, very well described. I think one of my biggest discoveries with Ayurveda has been that, you know, like you said, a lot of other systems tend to be unidimensional. They focus on disease and then some cure or treatment for disease. But, you know, Ayurveda, and the name in itself, you know, when people say it is the science of life, it really encapsulates everything about life. So, you know, not just disease, but also health and living a fulfilling and joyous and healthy life. And today you see, you know, so many streams in modern medicine, right? Like people talk about mindfulness and the importance of mental health and so many things. But this was always a part of Ayurveda, you know. They didn't need a separate system to kind of emphasize the importance of some of these other aspects. So you kind of already answered, you know, what I was going to ask you, which is, you know, what India should really keep in mind when communicating about Ayurveda to the outside world. That was one of my questions. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just one point. Modern society is, you know, a lot of our beliefs are based on proof. So we need to have scientific data made available on the efficacy of Ayurveda in our lives as a preventive tool to build health, to build wellness, as also a curative tool. And it should not be that this is an informal thing that is part of our life. It should actually be formalized. One needs to understand that following Ayurveda is as much about science, and science always needs proof. So we need to have results of experiments conducted, medicines tested, etc. Scientific proof, what is being asked for. And I think we need to invest in that as a society, government, companies, individuals like you and me, people who are interested in Ayurveda, practice it, people who follow it on a daily basis. We need to actually also look at scientific proof that can be given to other people. Because there's one more thing, that, you know, Ayurveda is far more sustainable as a way of life, as a science, than allopathy is. And having been through cancer, I really know how much more sustainable it is. Now, I don't know if there are cancer curing drugs in Ayurveda. I'm not an Ayurveda doctor. I have to emphasize that. But I do know that Ayurveda, following this, the Ayurvedic system, is probably one of the things that would prevent us from actually getting such terrible diseases like cancer and a myriad other diseases. And this scientific thing, with the proof to back it, has to be invested in and made known to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Lalita ji, you've, as part of India Foundation's initiative of organizing Ayurveda Day globally, across the world in so many different countries. I know that you have been a part of so many conversations with Ayurveda stakeholders
Yes.
in these different parts of the world. So what did you observe was this one common thread that you see running across the Ayurveda community globally?
One of the major threads I saw was that we need to look at the living conditions of people in different countries, the weather they live in, the food they eat, the herbs that they have in their own countries, which may not be exactly what you get in India. And Ayurveda has the strength and the breadth, the depth to absorb all of this and use it to help people in their own situations. For example, people who live in North America, or people who live in Japan, or people who live in Latin America may have already a certain form of herbal medicine, what they call it nowadays, but a certain form of traditional customary medicines that they don't use very much nowadays. I've always heard that the original Americans, that is the Red Indians, as they call them, and the Aztecs, etc., the various tribes, what now are called tribes, but the populations of Latin America and also in Africa, have their own medicines and roots, herbs, etc., that they use, much like we do in India. So I think Ayurveda, and we have to look at the laws around non-traditional medicine, I think it's called, or traditional medicine, I'm not too sure. In various countries, you'll have a certain set of laws. In the US, you may have something else. In Australia, you may have something else. In Sweden or Yugoslavia, I mean, in different countries, they have different laws around this. So we have to work with the governments too in those places. It can't be an under the table affair sort of thing. It has to be formalized. And for that, we have to work with the local conditions, what is available locally, and of course, the local governments. This is very important.
Absolutely. So, Lalita ji, what according to you can the industry, the governments and the consumers globally, how do you think they can be brought together to forge a successful way forward for, getting Ayurveda recognition as a contemporary and relevant health science?
Yeah, as you know, there are differences between practitioners of Ayurveda itself. Some of them promote one particular way of thinking, others promote another particular way. I think we need to put those differences to rest, and we need to concentrate on what actually is the goal of promoting Ayurveda. Of course, I'm not saying that all of it has to be done in a sort of corporate social responsibility way, that is without us looking at the monetization of it to a certain extent, because there is also a habit, I think, throughout the world that what you get for free, you don't always take, you take it at face value. You don't actually value it for what it's worth. And the old saying that money makes the world go around is very true. So a combination of, what and how Ayurveda can actually sustain life of not just an individual, but communities, countries, and the world is very important. The knowledge of it has to be, well, not just identified because we already have the knowledge, but we have to communicate this to other people. We also have to work in tandem with each other. Industry and government must work to come out with more scientific evidence that people are constantly asking for. And individuals must also put pressure on their governments, saying that, look, this is an alternative that is no longer just an alternative, it is a mainstream now. And we would like to have access to these remedies that will help us in remaining healthier.
Absolutely. That's a really good thought. And, we would also hope that through some of the initiatives that India Foundation has started, such as the Ayurveda Day initiative, this kind of awareness can be, it can grow around the world, and Ayurveda can get its due recognition. Just as we close this conversation, which has been a really fascinating conversation for me to hear from you, I would also really like to know, Lalita ji, what is your vision for the future of Ayurveda? So we're in 2020, which has been a landmark year in so many different ways, and we're looking at the next decade, say until 2030. What is your vision for Ayurveda?
Well, in 2030, by 2030, I hope that people have accepted Ayurveda not just as an alternative, but actually as an available remedy, an available source of health, of wellness, of disease prevention, also of disease, of being cured of many of the ills that we are going through at the present, and also that it is worth investing in. That this is not just knowledge passed down without any sort of scientific basis. Actually internalize the fact that Ayurveda is not just something you turn to after you run out of other options, but that it is a viable option, or one of the viable options that is available for health and wellness. A sustainable, healthy way of life.
Absolutely. And the Ayurveda Day initiative that India Foundation is anchoring is, of course, being held in sync with the very important United Nations WHO Sustainable Development Goal 3, which is of ensuring healthy lives and kind of living in harmony with nature in a sustainable way. Thank you so much, Lalita ji. That was
not at all.
That was a really good conversation. Lots of things to learn. Like I said, if we get any questions asking for your secret formulae that you have inherited, we will send that across to you.
Absolutely,
but,
absolutely.
I'm very grateful for your time and for all your efforts at India Foundation to grow the awareness around Ayurveda so it can be used by people all over the world to live a better, healthier, and more sustainable life.
Thank you, Ritika. Thank you very much. Namaste.